Welcome back to Vuln Vibes, everyone. Today we're going deep on a pretty critical vulnerability, and it's one that hits a tool I bet a lot of us use pretty regularly, WinRAR.
Yeah, it's one of those things you just kind of assume is going to be, solid.
Exactly. But we're talking about CVE 2025-31334, and specifically how it lets attackers bypass Mark of the Web, which, as I'm sure you all know, can then lead to arbitrary code execution. So since we're all security pros here, let's just get right to it. What are the technical nuts and bolts we need to understand about this vulnerability?
So the core issue here is how WinRAR handles symbolic links when they're packed inside a compressed archive. Like, imagine you've got a malicious.rar file, right?
Okay.
And inside, there's this sneaky symlink that looks like a normal file, but it actually points to an executable that's, also hidden in the archive.
Ah, I see where this is going. So when someone using a vulnerable version of WinRAR extracts this and they click on what they think is just a regular file,
Yeah.
actually the symlink boom, the bad executable runs.
Exactly. And here's the kicker. It completely bypasses the Windows Mark of the Web warning.
Right, which is usually our first line of defense against these kinds of things. Why is this particular bypass such a big deal? We see bypasses all the time. What makes this one stand out?
Well, think of Mark of the Web as kind of a gatekeeper, right? It's there to flag any files that came from, let's say, the internet or an email attachment, basically anything that wasn't directly created on your system. It's a big part of how Windows keeps us safe from silently executing potentially dangerous stuff.
So by getting around MotW, attackers are essentially making malware invisible to both the user and the OS itself.
Exactly. It's like creating this secret backdoor that lets malicious code slip in completely undetected.
Yeah.
And once that happens, the possibilities for what an attacker can do are pretty scary.
Speaking of scary possibilities, let's talk impact. What are the real-world scenarios where this vulnerability could really cause some damage?
Well, the obvious one is malware. We're talking viruses, ransomware, spyware, anything they can package up in that malicious RAR file could potentially get deployed without raising any red flags.
Oof, not good.
Not good at all. And it's not just malware. This could also make it much easier to steal sensitive data. Things like personal information, passwords, financial data, anything you wouldn't want falling into the wrong hands.
And of course, there's always the risk of the attacker gaining remote access to the compromised system, right?
Absolutely. It's all on the table. You get arbitrary code execution on a system. Who knows where it could go from there? Damage to the system itself is possible. You name it.
So this is definitely something we need to take seriously. For those listening, which versions of WinRAR are actually vulnerable?
So anything before version 7.1, really the big thing is if you're using WinRAR, you need to update like right now.
Update to 7.0 or later. Got it. Now, you mentioned earlier that this highlights a broader trend. For our security-minded audience, what's the key takeaway here?
I think what's so interesting here is how something seemingly basic, like a symlink in an archive, can be twisted to bypass a fundamental OS security mechanism. It really drives home the point that we have to stay vigilant about even the most commonplace software. This isn't some complex zero-day targeting, like kernel-level stuff. It's about exploiting expected behavior in a really subtle way.
That's a great point. So, listeners, think about how this kind of bypass fits into those attack chains you're always analyzing. What kind of initial access vectors could deliver a malicious RRR email, maybe a compromised website?
Yeah.
And then once they get code execution, what comes next? What would you expect to see in terms of post-exploitation activity?
And beyond specific attack chains, this brings up a question that every organization should be asking. How does this kind of relatively simple but effective bypass impact your threat modeling and your patching strategy? It really underscores the idea that every single layer in your security posture needs to be solid, because if one piece fails, the whole thing can come crashing down.
Really makes you think. All right, well, the big takeaway for everyone today is update WinRAR now. It's a perfect example of how even those tools we use every day can pose a huge risk if we don't keep them up to date. And, as always, we'll keep you updated on the latest developments in cybersecurity right here on Vuln Vibes.